What's up, guys? So I got a series of Tupac videos I'm trying to roll out for everybody, and it dawned on me that there might not be a lot of people even hip to some of the basic information about Pac. So I got this video here that I'm trying to lay out that just goes through some of the questions and some of the history about the whole situation. I wanted to put this as the first video in the series. It's by far the least interesting of them all, but it does give you some background about questions, unanswered questions, and new questions that are starting to arise. So without further ado, here's that video, and in the link at the end, you'll see the playlist of videos where you can go in and go down the complete rabbit hole with me. Tupac's deathbed, Tupac's missing car, Tupac's garage full of all these supercars, Tupac's secret locker with all this mind-blowing information, and I even got a video about this murder weapon and what may have happened with the murder weapon. So thanks for joining me on this, and without further ado, let's get into this first video, and then stay tuned for all the other videos. Let's get it.
Ultimately, our persistence in this investigation has paid off.
The FBI has just released secret files about Tupac Shakur's murder, and they are far from ordinary. These documents arrive in fragments, redactions, and cross-references, revealing a pattern that was never meant to be seen together. When pieced side by side, they completely change how we understand Tupac's final years and what really surrounded his death. Tupac was not viewed as just another celebrity who later became the victim of violence. The material shows that his name was already moving through systems that track influence, disruption, and risk. That means federal awareness did not begin after his murder. It existed before it. That single detail shifts the emotional weight of everything that followed. It reframes his death as the continuation of attention, not its beginning.
You know what I'm saying? It's that situation when you got, we are living in a war zone. It's not as easy as these people are making us think, that they just got some criminal-ass black kids with guns. It is not like that.
This changes the category Tupac belonged to. He was no longer just a rapper navigating fame and street conflict. He had crossed into a space where institutions recognized him as something more consequential. His reach was not limited to charts or album sales. His voice carried into political, social, and cultural pressure points. That kind of influence does not remain invisible and does not remain neutral in the eyes of powerful systems. By the mid-1990s, Tupac was shaping how millions of people talked about police, power, poverty, and incarceration. He spoke directly, without filters, and without concern for institutional comfort. His unpredictability did not make him dangerous because of violence. It made him dangerous because of influence. Once someone reaches that level, events around them no longer seem random.
This is when they beat down Orlando, I think. MGM Grand, the night of the
MGM
Tyson
Grand
fight.
moment carries far more
Yep.
weight than anyone realized. For years, it was dismissed as a fight over a chain, a simple clash of egos, but the newly released surveillance reframes it as a pressure point where status, power, and humiliation collided in full view. In that world, a chain is not jewelry. It is identity, respect, and dominance. A message that ripples through crews, loyalties, and reputations long after the cameras stop rolling. While rumors shaped public memory, the real footage sat hidden, preserving the true timeline. Today, prosecutors treat that hallway as the ignition point, the moment where emotional, social, and institutional forces converged, setting the deadly chain of events into motion. This is where the overlap becomes dangerous.
Yeah, that dude got beat down. You see this woman right here? She's just chilling, waiting on somebody, and as soon as she sees this break out, she's like, I'm out. She's like, what's going on over there? Woo, I'm out.
Street conflict alone does not explain what happened next. Industry dynamics alone do not explain it. Law enforcement awareness alone does not explain it. The risk comes from all of them operating in the same space around the same person.
It showed Tupac there with Suge Knight leaving the MGM. We had seen that other surveillance video that is in color there, but a lot of these photos, we've seen obviously where this shooting happened, but these are the photos and evidence that police have been sitting on now for 27 years.
Yeah.
That is why the long delay in releasing evidence becomes part of the story itself. Surveillance footage, photos, and records existed while myths and theories filled the silence. Public understanding was shaped without access to critical pieces. That gap created a version of reality that people accepted. Then, decades later, pieces of the true record begin to surface, and the meaning of earlier moments changes. Suddenly, events that once felt isolated feel connected. Decisions that once felt impulsive feel positioned. The night no longer looks chaotic. It looks structured by circumstances that had already been building. In that structure, Tupac does not appear as a man who simply made the wrong choices. He appears as a man standing at the intersection of street conflict, industry power, and institutional awareness at the same time. That is not a safe place to exist, especially when emotions are high and reputations are on the line. This is what makes the FBI layer so unsettling. It does not point to a single hidden hand. It shows that multiple hands were already on the table. It shows that Tupac's position had become volatile long before the final moments of that night. And that leads directly into the next layer of the story.
Dwayne Keefe D. Davis insists he was 300 miles away when the rapper was shot. Now he's pointing the finger at someone else.
The
Nah, bro. I've seen where he said he was in the backseat of the car before.
MGM Grand moment carries far more weight than anyone realized. For years, it was dismissed as a fight over a chain, a simple clash, but the newly released surveillance reframes it as a pressure point where status, power, and humiliation collided in full view. In that world, a chain is not jewelry. It is identity, respect, and dominance. A message that ripples through crews, loyalties, and reputations long after the cameras stop rolling. While rumors shape public memory, the real footage sat hidden, preserving the true timeline. Today, prosecutors treat that hallway as the ignition point, the moment where emotional, social, and institutional forces converged, setting the deadly chain of events into motion.
I ain't killed nobody, never did ever kill nobody. They don't have no evidence against me. Came and put me in Las Vegas.
For years, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis positioned himself as someone who knew exactly what happened. In interviews and in his memoir, he described details that placed him inside the story. He spoke with confidence. He spoke with specificity. He placed people, vehicles, and actions into a clear sequence. At the time, those words carried little immediate risk. They were part of storytelling, not courtroom evidence. At that point, prosecutors are no longer just presenting a crime. They are presenting a framework. They curate what the jury sees. This is not just an evidence presentation. It is a narrative construction designed to survive aggressive challenge. That raises a question that never fully disappears. Is this about revealing the full truth, or is it about building the most defensible version of events? Every case lives in that tension. What strengthens one narrative may quietly weaken another. What is shown shapes what is believed. What remains unseen still exists, but it does not get a voice in the courtroom. That is where the FBI layer becomes impossible to ignore.
They certainly did, Nicole. And of course, here over the past couple of months, prosecutors have been building their case against Dwayne Keefe D. Davis to indict him in the murder of Tupac Shakur. And these photos and videos are just some of the evidence that was shown to a grand jury, helping them build their case.
Federal attention means Tupac was not just another victim. It means he existed within systems that track influence, disruption, and risk. It means awareness may have existed before the night unfolded. That does not prove intervention. It does not prove coordination. It does, however, prove that his position in society was already being evaluated in ways the public never saw. That creates gaps in the story. Gaps between what was known and what was acted on. Gaps between awareness and response. Those gaps do not accuse. They suggest. They linger. They leave open questions that official timelines do not fully close. In this version of the story, the FBI is not loud. It is present. It sits in the background as a silent layer that reframes how every other action is interpreted. It turns coincidence into convergence. It turns isolation into overlap. That is what makes this case feel heavier with every new release.
Bullet holes scattered all across that vehicle. This newly released evidence showing never-before-seen details in a case that's cracked wide open some 27 years later.
Each photo narrows the story. Each denial sharpens the conflict. Each new name widens the scope. Instead of closing the case emotionally, the evidence continues to expand it structurally. And that is where the tension reaches its next level. Because once the courtroom locks these images and narratives into an official record, the version of history that survives may not be the version that answers every question. It will be the version that fits the evidence that was allowed to be seen. What remains in files, what stays redacted.
So, from my knowledge, Keefe said that Puffy put out $1 million hit on Pac. But we also know that Suge was a dangerous dude, and if he knew that Pac had all this planned, he too could have took Pac out because he would have wanted the rights to all of Pac's music under death row. Whereas if Pac was able to get out, he might have been able to finesse a way to keep his catalog. Plus, it's just a slight at death row and a slight at Suge. At least Suge would perceive it as that if Pac left.
And what was never shown may never enter that room. And that means the final story the public receives could be only one layer of a much larger truth. A case does not stay quiet for 27 years because there is nothing to work with. It stays quiet when movement is inconvenient. It stays quiet when timing is wrong. It stays quiet when opening certain doors creates more problems than it solves. That does not require a conspiracy. It only requires institutions that understand how to wait. So the real question is not why the case was cold. The real question is why it suddenly warmed up.
Prosecutors say some photos were on Polaroid, others on film. Photos like these of the BMW Tupac was riding in with night. Images shown to a grand jury include the car riddled with bullet holes. Prosecutors also showing where Shakur was sitting in the passenger seat in a photo of a car door with a hole through it.
What changed now after decades of silence to make this moment acceptable for action? Political climate matters. Cultural pressure matters. Institutional priorities matter. Public attention matters. Cases do not exist in a vacuum. They move when the environment around them allows movement. It is not hard to notice that this case reactivated at a time when old institutions are under new scrutiny, when historical cases are being reopened, and when public trust demands visible accountability. That kind of environment creates space for cases that were once considered too complicated, too sensitive, or too messy to suddenly become manageable. That makes the 27-year delay feel less accidental and more strategic. In that light, this prosecution does not feel like the start of justice. It feels like the moment when justice became convenient. That realization forces the story into a much larger frame.
Prove that I orchestrated this. You know what I'm saying? Your key witness orchestrated this. They top witness is the lead suspect.
The defense pointing to someone else, Reggie Wright Jr.
Because Tupac's case is not just about one man and one night. Tupac became a symbol long before he became a victim. He represented a generation, a voice, and a cultural shift that made powerful people uncomfortable. His music, his interviews, and his presence carried meaning that went far beyond entertainment. When someone like that dies, the story does not end. It transforms. Some deaths close chapters. They produce a clear villain, a clear motive, and a clean conclusion. Other deaths expose systems. They reveal how power, culture, and violence overlap. They show how different worlds collide and how accountability becomes complicated when influence is involved. Tupac's case belongs to that second category. The more you zoom out, the more you see patterns instead of isolated events. You see how certain figures remain protected. You see how certain timelines never quite line up. You see how federal awareness exists in the background without ever being fully explained. That creates a strange imbalance. On one side, you have physical evidence that has now been released and used. On the other side, you have knowledge that is acknowledged but never fully detailed. That gap is where questions live. That gap is where public trust erodes. That gap is where stories become heavier instead of lighter.
The man charged in Tupac Shakur's murder is speaking out from behind bars for the first time. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis insists he was 300 miles away when the rapper was shot. Now he's pointing the finger at someone else. Chief Investigative Correspondent Erica.
Of course he is.
Conflicting timelines between Davis's claims and physical evidence are one example. His past descriptions and current denials do not comfortably fit with what the car, the casings, and the angles show. That tension is not accidental. It suggests that someone is adjusting their story to survive, while the physical record remains stubbornly unchanged. Then there is the issue of who has not been touched. High-profile cases always create a visible list of suspects and an invisible list of people who are never seriously pursued. The public rarely sees the second list. It exists quietly, in choices about where pressure is applied and where it is not. That does not mean guilt. It does mean influence. It means certain paths are considered more dangerous than others. Federal awareness adds another unresolved layer. If Tupac was on institutional radar before his death, then knowledge existed that has never been fully accounted for. What was known? Who knew it? What was discussed internally? What decisions were made based on that knowledge? Those answers remain largely invisible, and that invisibility matters. So does the surveillance that remained hidden for decades. Surveillance does not stay buried by accident for nearly 30 years. It stays buried because releasing it earlier would have changed narratives at a time when systems were not prepared for that change. Releasing it now suggests the cost of disclosure has shifted. The question becomes who benefits from that shift, because silence is not neutral. Silence protects someone. The hardest question in this case is not who fired the shots. The hardest question is who benefited from the story staying quiet for as long as it did. That brings everything back to the files. The FBI material did not just add information, it changed the meaning of the entire case. It reframed Tupac's position in society. It reframed how his death should be interpreted. It reframed the idea of randomness, replacing it with awareness. Through that lens, this is no longer a simple whodunit. It becomes a story of containment, of delayed truth, and of systems that manage risk rather than solve mysteries. It becomes a story in which justice arrives only when it is safe to arrive. And that leads to the most chilling possibility of all. Tupac may not have just been killed. He may have been managed as a problem.
All right, guys. Well, there we go. Previous video, I had more up-to-date, pertinent information, but that one still had some pretty intriguing things in it, especially in listening to how Keefe's story wavered. Anyway, guys, I hope you liked the video. Leave a like down below. We're going to keep going down this Tupac rabbit hole, so look out for the next video. I hope to see you again soon. You're a daisy if you do. Peace!